Dr. Ronnie Floyd, President and CEO of the Southern Baptist Convention Executive Committee, for a report.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, everyone. I bring greetings today on behalf of the Southern Baptist Convention Executive Committee, and we want to welcome you to Music City, Nashville, Tennessee. Gina and I have come to love this city in the 24 months that we have been here, and we're grateful to represent our friends today at the Executive Committee. To our messengers, we welcome you to this city. We could say so much about the grand matters about the city, but we must move forward in relationship to our business today. We'd like to begin this moment by the honoring of a special couple that I would like to invite to the stage today, Dr. and Mrs. O.S. Hawkins, to join me at the platform along with my wife, Gina. While they are walking, let me say this to you, that Dr. and Mrs. Hawkins are personal and dear friends to Gina and me. Dr. Hawkins has served as President and CEO of Guidestone Financial Services for the past 24 years. And when our cherished friend retires in 2022, he will leave in his 25th years of service to this organization. We have prepared a resolution that we will not take the time to read. However, his accomplishments and that of Guidestone is what godly, remarkable, and great commission leadership is able to do. SBC family, the Bible teaches us to give honor to whom honor is due. Dr. O.S. Hawkins is beyond worthy of this honor, as he and his wife have served this convention for many, many years. Would you express your gratitude to Dr. and Mrs. O.S. Hawkins? Now I want to turn our attention to our report this morning in relationship to the recommendations that we are bringing to you. I thank the diligent work that has occurred. As a reminder, in case you do not know, the Executive Committee is comprised of 86 members from cooperating Southern Baptist churches across the United States. The Executive Committee is composed of people like you who love the Lord, believe the Bible to be the infallible Word of God, and operate their lives believing that we have good news for the whole world. Today, it is an honor to begin this time because we want to talk to you today about 9 motions that we are presenting in this session. And then this afternoon at 2:30 p.m., we have worked diligently for almost 2 years on Vision 2025, and we hope that we will be able to share those words with you. First, I want to refer you to a motion that was made by Leroy Fountain from the state of Louisiana when we met last in Birmingham, Alabama. Leroy's motion was referred to the Executive Committee, asked for a comprehensive progress report on 10 recommended actions that were adopted at the SBC annual meeting in 2011 to intentionally focus on the increasing diverse engagement in the SBC. I would encourage you to take the time to read that full report on diversity. It's found on pages 30 and 35 in the 2021 book of reports. Now, there are a number of observations that I could make. I want to limit it only to 3 quick observations. You will discover in that report that in 1990, 30 years ago, only 8.4% of our congregations were non-Anglo or ethnic minority congregations. Today, at this moment, 22.3% of our Southern Baptist congregations are non-Anglo or ethnic minority congregations. This is an increase of 7,992 congregations since 1990. African American congregations have grown from 1,007 in 1990 to 3,920 in 2018. During this same period, Hispanic congregations grew from 1,189 congregations to 3,509. And Asian American congregations have grown from 649 to 2,095. While we have much work to do, this report does reflect a clear advance in our diversity across the SBC. Of all people, Christians should love one another and be standing together against the sin of racism. Our statement of faith, the Baptist Faith and Message 2000, is clear about this. In just a few moments from now, we will ask you to affirm for the second year an amendment to the SBC Constitution that states our stand against all forms of racism against all people. The SBC Executive Committee has been very intentional in our support of diversity as well. This morning, I want to introduce to you one of the Executive Committee staff teams that we do have. They are called the Great Commission Relations and Mobilization Team. I have asked them to join me on the stage so you can meet them. First, Dr. Willie McLaurin, Vice President for Great Commission Relations and Mobilization. He leads the team who is beside him, who is also a team of executive directors. These men are highly skilled, highly networked, good and godly men. Julio Adiola is Executive Director of Hispanic Relations and Mobilization. Peter Yanis is Executive Director of Asian American Relations and Mobilization. And Charles Grant is Executive Director of African American Relations and Mobilization. And Ashley Clayton is Executive Director for Church Affiliations. Thank you, team, and all of your staff at the Executive Committee. Thank all of you, and we give God praise for you. At this time, it is my privilege to present to you our chairman, Pastor Roland Slade, who is chairman of the Executive Committee and was reelected to a second year of presiding as chairman of the SBC Executive Committee. Pastor Slade, would you please present your motions?
Thank you, Dr. Floyd. Mr. President, as Dr. Floyd stated, we have 9 Executive Committee recommendations to make in this EC Report Part 1. I'll be making the first one. I move the adoption of the Executive Committee Recommendation Number 1, Amendment of the SBC Constitution Article 3, Composition, Section 1, to expand the definition of cooperating church regarding sexual abuse and racial discrimination. Final vote. This recommendation can be found on page 51 of the SBC Book of Reports.
So the question is on the adoption of Recommendation 1, the amendment of the SBC Constitution, Article 3. If you are in favor of the recommendation. Oh, are you ready for the question? 6A to speak against.
Absolutely not. I'd like to speak against recommendation number 7.
All right, hang on, step back a second. We're going to ask somebody else wants to speak. Number 1.
Okay. At this point, we're only thinking about recommendation number 1. We're going to ask our team over here to clear the board of people that have lined up to speak to these things, and only if somebody is here to speak for or against recommendation number 1 are they to be recognized at this time.
Okay, now ask them if you want to speak to number 1, press the button.
So if you want to speak to recommendation number 1, please press the button there at your microphone. Okay, seeing none. If you are in favor of recommendation number 1, please indicate so by uplifted ballot. Opposed by same sign. And the affirmatives have it.
Mr. President, I would like to introduce Chad Garrison, Vice Chair, Committee on Convention, Missions, and Ministry, who will bring the next recommendation.
Mr. President, I move the adoption of Executive Committee Recommendation Number 2, the amendment of SBC Constitution, Article 5, Section 2, Officer Election. This recommendation can be found on page 52 of the 2021 SBC Book of Reports.
So the question is on the recommendation of, or the adoption of recommendation number 2. Are you ready for the question? Okay. All those in favor of adopting recommendation number 2, if you would indicate so by uplifted ballot. All opposed, the same sign. Affirmatives carry it.
Mr. President, I would like to introduce Andrew Hunt, Secretary, Committee on Convention, Missions, and Ministry, who will bring our next recommendation.
Mr. President, I move the adoption of Executive Committee Recommendation Number 3, amendment of SBC Bylaw 36, amendments to allow the voting in the final session. This recommendation can be found on page 52 of the 2021 SBC Book of Reports.
So again, the question is on the adoption of recommendation number 3 on page 52 of your annual meeting book. Are you ready for the question? Those in favor of the recommendation number 3 indicate so by uplifted ballot. Those opposed, the same sign. And the affirmatives carry it.
Mr. President, I would like to introduce Jim Gregory, Chairman, Committee on Southern Baptist Relations, who will bring our next recommendation.
Mr. President, I move the adoption of Executive Committee Recommendation Number 4. SBC Executive Committee request for approval of Mission and Ministry Statement Amendment. This recommendation can be found on page 53 in the 2021 SBC Book of Reports.
Thank you, Jim. So the question is on the adoption of recommendation number 4 on page 53. Are you ready for the question? 3A, do you have an amendment?
Yes, sir.
Or recommendation?
My name is Spence Shelton, Mercy Church, Charlotte, North Carolina. And I have an amendment to the first, well, it's one sentence, where it says the SBC Executive Committee seeks to empower churches to prioritize, etc. I would like to amend that statement empower, or that word empower, to say serve, and where it says to prioritize, amend it to say as they prioritize, and I can speak to that amendment if I get the time.
Is there a second? First, Spence, is there a second to? You may speak to your amendment.
Man. Well, first, let me say thank you to the Executive Committee for all of their hard work. This is offered as a friendly amendment. Consider this in Hebrews 10:24. We hope to only provoke to love and good works. But we are a bottom-up, not a top-down convention of churches. The local church is the headquarters of Great Commission Baptist, and this amendment seeks to reflect that. The churches empower the Executive Committee to serve us. They do not empower local churches to that mission.
Does the committee wish to respond?
We thank you for that motion and the spirit in which you gave it. Just quickly, let me say the word empower was chosen to make our commitment as the executive committee in serving the churches. That is our intent and desire. And so that word shows activity and commitment from us to the churches. But your motion says it very well as well. And since our desire is to serve the churches as you have described, we receive that as a friendly amendment, and we'll be glad to work with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any objection to the amendment? Then it is adopted. So we're back to the question on the adoption of recommendation number 4 as amended. Let me read the part that was changed just so you know exactly what differs from your book of reports. The SBC Executive Committee seeks to serve churches as they prioritize, elevate, and accelerate the vision, and then everything else is as written. If you are in favor of microphone 7A, do you wish to speak against?
Yes. Mark Reynolds, Little River Baptist Church, Penrose, North Carolina. My motion, or on this motion, the acting of the convention ad interim is stricken through. My understanding of the executive committee is that its role is to act ad interim. So striking that from the mission seems just wrong.
Thank you, sir.
Ask him, are you ready for the question of recommendation 4?
So are you ready for the question on the adoption of recommendation 4? All those in favor of adopting resolution 4 as written and amended, if you would indicate so by uplifted ballot. All those opposed, same sign. Recommendation is adopted as amended.
Mr. President, I would like to introduce Mrs. Robin Harry, Chair, Committee on Convention Finances and Stewardship Development, who will bring our next recommendation.
Mr. President, I move the adoption of Executive Committee Recommendation Number 5, the 2021-2022 SBC Cooperative Program Allocation Budget. This recommendation can be found on page 56 in the 2021 SBC Book of Reports.
So again, the questions on the adoption of recommendation 5 on page 56. Are you ready for the question? 9A, do you have an amendment?
Yes, Mr. President, I do have an amendment. I'm Tom Askell, pastor of Grace Baptist Church in Cape Coral, Florida. I move that the 2021-2022 proposed SBC Cooperative Program allocation budget be amended to prohibit any funds being allocated to any institution, agency, or entity that in any way supports, promotes, or advocates any tenets of critical theory, critical race theory, or intersectionality.
I heard a second. All right, Tom, thank you very much. I think I know where I want to go with this, but give me just a second, if you will. Stand at ease for a moment.
Mm-hmm. No, thanks.
If you'll come back to order. So let me make clear, after consulting with the parliamentarians and lawyers, I am no advocate of CRT, but after discussing this with them, I'm going to rule that amendment out of order for the following reasons. First, it violates the principles of our Southern Baptist system, the trustee system, namely, which has been the cornerstone of our polity for as long as any of us can remember. We have a system that was designed to work in a certain way, and that means if we want to see a certain thing changed, then we persuade Southern Baptists and elect a president that appoints trustees that holds these entities accountable. Also, after discussing this with the parliamentarians and lawyers, it is their unanimous opinion that it would be impossible to administer this. The amendment does not specify, for example, who determines if they are out of order, what tenets of CRT we are talking about, and who arbitrates, which means that it is not giving it to anyone who actually can do anything with it. So for that reason, with their counsel, I'm going to rule that out of order. Messengers are certainly free to appeal that ruling if they want to, but that is the ruling as it stands. So the question now is on the recommendation number 5. Are you ready for the...
Go back to the microphone. To Tom.
Wasn't.
He did not appeal? He did not want to? Okay. All right. Number 9A wants to speak for.
9A wants to speak for recommendation number 5.
No, sir, I have a point of personal order. I would like to appeal the decision of the chair that was just made to rule my amendment out of order.
Is there a second to that? Okay. What?
You can restate your reason.
Okay. Do you wish to speak for your appeal?
Yes, sir, I do. We can certainly amend my amendment to provide a council of experienced pastors to make those judgments that you said can't be made. But here we are at this convention with more messengers than we've had in recent years, and they came here to be heard. They came here to hear discussions about these issues that have divided us the last 2 years. And I think it would be very appropriate for our messengers to be given the opportunity to vote on this amendment of the allocation of the cooperative program dollars that are given from our churches to finance our institutions and our agencies. So I respectfully ask that the decision be reversed.
Again, to respond for the reason for the ruling of out of order, let me make it clear that I nor our parliamentarians or lawyers have any desire to thwart or silence the voice of any of our messengers. The question is simply doing it in the means by which Southern Baptists have customarily done it and through which they have appointed it. Again, we have a system that has worked for us for many years. It is a reliable system, the trustee system, and there are means to do that. There is also the resolutions committee. Secondly, I would say that while it is possible to amend the amendment and to submit a new one, I am simply ruling on the amendment as written, which, again, as the parliamentarians say, is not in the form that it actually can be arbitrated, because it does not specify who would arbitrate, does not specify which tenets of CRT they are using, does not specify that process. And so for that reason, again, the parliamentarians and the lawyers believe that this, as written, is out of order so that Southern Baptists can make their voice heard in the means and by the channels which they have historically done that and appointed as their governance. So are you ready for the question on the appeal? Okay, the question is, shall the decision of the chair be sustained? Meaning that the amendment is out of order. Shall the decision of the chair be sustained? If that is your choice and you affirm that, please indicate so by uplifted ballot. Shall the opinion of the chair be overturned? If that is your wish, then please raise your ballot. The majority has it, and the decision of the chair is sustained. So now again, the question is on the adoption of recommendation number 5. Does 5B wish to speak against?
Yes, Mr. President. My name is Clint Presley. I am the senior pastor of Hickory Grove Baptist Church and a messenger of the same. I would like to speak against the amendment from Mr. Tom Askell.
Clint, as much as we would all love to hear from you in this, I would just say that it's already been ruled out of order, and so...
Are you ruling me out of order, JD?
I really don't want to, Clint. I'm going to tell you that, of all the people in here. Do not flex at me. All right. Love you, brother. Love you, brother. All right. Question is on the adoption of recommendation number 5. As written, if you're ready for the question, if you are wanting to adopt recommendation number 5 as written, please indicate so by uplifted ballot. You can put them down if you wish to not adopt it, same sign. The recommendation carries.
Mason, Vice Chair, Committee on Convention Finances and Stewardship Development, to bring our next recommendation.
Thank you, Brother Rowland. Mr. President, I move the adoption of the Executive Committee Recommendation Number 6, 2021-22 SBC Executive Committee and SBC Operating Budget. This recommendation can be found on page 57 in the 21 SBC Book of Reports.
Question is on the adoption of recommendation 6. Are you ready for the question? All those wishing to adopt recommendation 6, if you would indicate so by uplifted ballot. Opposed, the same sign. Affirmative carries.
Mr. President, I would like to ask Mrs. Robin Harry to return to the podium to bring our next recommendation.
Mr. President, I move the adoption of Executive Committee Recommendation Number 7. This was SBC referral to request the SBC Executive Committee to amend the business and financial plan to strengthen the fiscal accountability of entities. This recommendation can be found on page 58 in the 2021 SBC Book of Reports. Mr. President, with your approval, I would like to speak about this recommendation.
Yes, ma'am.
I just thought it would be helpful to just give a little bit of context. In the 2019 annual meeting, a motion was brought to the floor of the annual meeting and passed to amend the business and financial plan. It was charged to the Executive Committee, assigned then to the Committee on Convention Finances and Stewardship Development, who then selected an ad hoc committee to devote their attention. And I have the members of all but one. One was not able to be here today. I thought it would be helpful for you to just know the spirit of the process. The spirit of the process was intended to be one of cooperation. We engaged with our entity CFOs, our entity presidents, our SBC legal counsel, and then others that had expertise that could speak into this document. So the goal was to balance the request for more transparency and accountability while also acknowledging and respecting the autonomy of our entities and the fact that they have boards of trustees who provide governance and oversight for those entities. So thank you, Mr. President, for allowing me to give some context and at least the spirit of the process and the objective.
Thank you, Robin. The question now is on the adoption of recommendation number 7. Are you ready for the question? 7A, do you wish to speak against this recommendation?
Yes, Mr. President. Brian Sandifer, pastor and messenger of Potomac Heights Baptist Church in Indian Head, Maryland. With respect, I heard you say just a moment ago, Mr. President, how we have trustees that are responsible for overseeing these entities. But on page 66 of the Book of Reports, under this number 7, it says, in the unlikely event the confirmation is not received in a timely manner, funds available for distribution may be escrowed until this confirmation is received. And so it seems to me that now the Executive Committee has the power of the purse over all of our institutions instead of the trustees having the power of the purse over these institutions.
Anyone on the committee wish to respond?
Yes, I understand that concern. This was in response to the messenger's request to have some method to make sure that all of the things outlined in the business and financial plan have been met and addressed.
1A, do you have an amendment?
Yes. Bob Curtis, Messenger, First Baptist Church, Dela Sioux, Farmington, Missouri. I move that the motion be amended by striking out the following wording in the third paragraph of Article 13, Section A, Financial Reports, page 63 in your book of reports. And these would be the words that I would move to amend to strike and then add words momentarily. Cooperating Southern Baptist churches have access through the convention annual to information from convention entities regarding income, expenditures, debts, reserves, and operating balances. Additional inquiries may be made by official action of a cooperating Southern Baptist church. Such inquiries, including requests for salary structure information, may be submitted to entity board and will be handled based on the entity board's approved guidelines. I wish to strike those words and add in their place the following current reading in our business and financial plan. Quote, members of cooperating Southern Baptist churches shall have access to information from the records of Southern Baptist Convention entities regarding income, expenditures, debts, reserves, operating balances, and salary structures, unquote. If seconded, I would like to address the amendment.
Is there a second? I hear a second. You may speak to your amendment.
Thank you. I want to first thank the committee. I've served on a board in our denomination, chairing that board, and your work is not an easy work, particularly when you try to work things out together for thousands of Baptists. So I appreciate that. Appreciate all who are called to kingdom service and the time that was done in preparation for this document. My concern begins with, in the preface on page 58, it says, we desire to strengthen transparency, accountability, and faithful stewardship of God's resources. I believe that this proposal, as I just stated, would not do so. In fact, I think it does the opposite. One, it requires church action, and I know Baptists are just dying to have something else to vote on in a business meeting. Once approved, it would go to the board or the entity, and they would have the option of either saying no, or the other question is, when would they do so, since boards do not meet every single day? We have many issues that we have been dealing with and are and will be dealing with, and we're talking about love and unification and obviously transparency. We don't want to add another layer of possible bureaucracy or question with regard to this. And so because of that, I would move the adoption of my amendment. Thank you, sir.
This committee, anyone in the committee want to respond?
To that, and there's actually two parts of that. The first one, in a desire for it to be done in an orderly fashion, that additional language was added. Otherwise, it could be very onerous on our entities if you could have someone just all day long just responding to questions. And so for it to be done in an orderly fashion, it would come as an official action of the church. The second part of that, again, going back to our entities and the governance of our entities, we, the messengers here today, are going to vote on the trustees that will serve on our entities. They are our peers. It is appropriate for that information, specific information requested of an entity, to be received by that entity, and that would be the avenue for gaining that information.
6A, do you wish to speak against the amendment? 3A, do you wish to speak against the amendment?
Mine is against the actual recommendation.
Then the question is on the adoption.
So the question first, Vance, is on the adoption of the amendment. So if you are in favor of the adoption of the amendment to recommendation 7, to strike the paragraph on page 63, starting with the words cooperating Southern Baptist churches and ending with board's approved guidelines, and to keep the current language in the business and financial report. If you are in favor of that amendment, please indicate so by uplifted ballot. If you are opposed to that amendment, same sign.
Negative has it.
The negative has it and the amendment fails. So now, 6A, do you wish to speak against the recommendation itself?
Yes, Mr. President. My name is John Candler, and I'm a messenger from Ashland Avenue Baptist Church in Lexington, Kentucky. Mr. President and fellow messengers, while I find much about this business and finance plan to be helpful, I'm opposed to the language that grants the executive committee the authority to escrow cooperative program funds belonging to our entity. And I would simply say this: I don't think it is wise to give our executive committee additional authority at this time when they are under investigation for their response to sexual abuse and other perceived overreaches. And so I would encourage you to join me in voting against this plan.
Is there anyone who wishes to speak for the recommendation? 3A, against the recommendation.
Yeah, thank you. Vance Pittman from Hope Church in Las Vegas, Nevada. And while I appreciate that the executive committee is simply responding to a motion from 2019 or a recommendation from 2019, and I appreciate their work and effort, I really do oppose this recommendation for, in some reasons, because of the same thing my brother just said. Last week, the executive committee initiated an investigation of itself through a third party, specifically looking into some allegations surrounding sexual abuse cases. And this proposal would be an unprecedented expansion of the executive committee powers, and in many ways placing the executive committee between the local churches and the entities that we're trying to support through the cooperative program. With so many questions that are unanswered right now, I think it seems obvious to me that it's not the right time to allow expanded powers of the executive committee and allowing them the privilege to be able to escrow funds. This is a massive decision, and I think it's important more for us to get it right than to get it done quickly. And there's no reason this has to be done this year. Let the investigation play out. And at next year's convention, should we choose to do this, we can always add this. But I think time demands that we wait to let everything come out before we accept a recommendation like this.
Thank you, Vance. Does the committee wish to respond?
No, we want to hear from the convention and from the messengers.
Are you ready for the question? 2A to speak against.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. This is Jay Adkins, First Baptist Church of West Wego, Louisiana. I appreciate the work of the group, and I know that there are important things in this that we need to deal with. But as a former trustee of a Baptist college, I'm keenly aware of the concerns related to accreditation regarding undue influence. I'm very concerned about a portion of the text of this amendment related to ascending liability and the punitive act of escrowing CP funds, especially when that act has never been given to to the executive committee. I would like to request to hear from one or more of our seminary presidents, I'm sure one of them are in the room here, as to their thoughts of these changes and how our accrediting agencies might interpret this move.
9A, would you state your point of order, please? Thank you, sir.
Matthew Broman, First Baptist Church, Sykeston. One of the gentlemen said that the executive committee was under investigation or something. Could you clarify that?
Unfortunately, one of the powers not given to the SBC president is to clarify what a messenger meant. So I'm going to recognize 3B.
Mr. President, my name is Danny Aiken, messenger from Wake Crossroads Baptist Church. I currently serve as the chairman of the Council of Seminary Presidents, and so I speak on behalf of all 6 of us opposing this recommendation. To honor the brevity of time, I would only add to what has been said, this would also jeopardize our standing with our accrediting agencies. We go through reaffirmation, all 6 of us, every 10 years. And every time we meet with them, on the one hand, they are amazed at this incredible thing called the Cooperative program and the fact that, for example, I hold out my hand every year and these wonderful people put $8 million in my hand and all I get to say is, thank you, please keep it up. But they also wonder about oversight, and often they will ask the questions, how does this keep outside interference with respect to the funds that you receive? And we always say we have a wonderful system set up with our Southern Baptist Convention. Those monies come from our churches who hold us accountable through the trustee system. Therefore, representing all 6 seminary presidents, we would ask that this recommendation be defeated. Thank you.
Danny, would you like to call, Danny Aiken, would you like to call for the question?
I would be delighted to call for the question, Mr. President.
Takes a 2/3 vote to call for the question. If you are in favor of calling for the question on this discussion, would you raise your ballot? Those opposed, same sign. Affirmative carries it. So now we are going to vote on the recommendation number 7, whether to adopt it or not, okay? Are we clear? So we're voting whether to adopt recommendation 7. If you are in favor of adopting the recommendation, please indicate so by uplifted ballot. Those opposed? I think the affirmatives have it. The negatives. The negatives have it. Pride goes before a fall.
Mr. President, I would like to introduce Ron Showers, Chair, Committee on Convention, Missions, and Ministry, to bring our next recommendation.
Mr. President, I move for the adoption of the Executive Committee recommendation number 8. This comes from Lifeway Christian Resources. It's a request for approval of their mission and ministry statement amendment. This recommendation can be found on page 68 in the 2021 SBC Book of Reports.
So the question is on the adoption of recommendation number 8 on page 68 of your Book of Reports. Are you ready for the question? 7A wishes to speak against.
Hello, Mr. President, and all the others. I am Michael Schultz. I'm the pastor of Antioch Baptist Church in Lewisburg, Kentucky. I'm going to speak against the recommendation. because Section 3 under Ministries, where we have completely deleted the assistance that Lifeway is committed to in supporting homeschools at Christian churches and elsewhere. I am a father and increasingly distrust our public education system in the United States, and I think that there are a lot of other people with me in that. At this time in America's history, I think it would be a mistake for the Southern Baptist Convention to step away from supporting homeschools. Thank you.
Yes.
Happy to speak to that. We certainly want to affirm and support homeschool families. And we think providing high-quality materials for homeschool families is important. What we are simply proposing is that we believe that many of our existing materials can be adapted for homeschool use, such as during the COVID-19 season, we saw many homeschool families take our materials as we were able to make them available online and use them in a homeschool environment. So we are certainly not backing away from homeschool families, but looking to better resource them with the materials that we provide.
Thank you, Ben. Unfortunately, time for this executive committee report and the recommendations has expired. So we are going to put this recommendation 8 to a vote, and then we will cease this, and then they will have a part 2 later. Are you ready for the question on recommendation 8? If you are in favor of adopting recommendation 8 on page 68 of your book of reports, please indicate so by uplifted ballot. All opposed, the same sign. Yeah, affirmative. The affirmatives have it by majority. The recommendation is adopted. It is not the chair's desire to hoodwink any of the messengers, so let's just be clear. If you are in favor of adopting recommendation 8, let me have you stand to your feet and hold your ballot up, if you would. If you are in favor of adopting recommendation 8, if you would stand to your feet. Okay, you may be seated. If you are opposed to the adoption of recommendation 8. So as not to, in any way, you may put your ballots down. Let's take a ballot vote on this one. And let me get Don, recording secretary. Why don't you come on? Yeah, come on, John.
Our registration secretary is busy counting ballots, but we plan for multiple ballots during this convention. And so we will try to assist you in voting. If you'll take out ballot number 16, and only ballot number 16. If you give us a different ballot, it will not be counted. So let me encourage you to take out ballot number 16 out of your book of ballots. Done so? If you're voting in favor of the recommendation, if you will mark the yes that's on your ballot. If you oppose the recommendation, if you will mark the no. Let me repeat. Yes, if you favor the recommendation. No, if you oppose the recommendation. Pass your ballots to the right when you're finished. And if you're on the end of an aisle, collect them and hold them up so that our ushers can collect the ballots. Be patient with us as we collect those ballots. Only those messengers in the hall are to vote. Pass the ballots to the right at the end of the aisle, hold them up, and our ushers will collect those.
Okay, as noted, the time for consideration of the Executive Committee's first report is expired. We're going to go now to a crossover report and presentation by Kevin Ezell, President of our North American Mission Board, and Johnny Hunt, who is our Senior Vice President for Evangelism and Leadership. I do have a request, though, if I could. There are a number of you that are moving about the hall, and of course that's fine, but there's also a lot of people that are on the outside waiting to come in. And so could I have everybody stand? Would you just stand to your feet for a moment? And I know you've been seated for a long time. Okay, if the seat next to you is empty and you know or suspect the person is not coming back, if you could move in, that will create space for people that are coming in. I know that you got here early and got those, 3 seats for the one person, and that was awesome, but we don't want people to have to stand outside when there are seats available. So if you would fill every available seat, if we could. And again, if you know the person's coming back, don't create an awkward situation. Okay. All right, you may be seated again, and the chair recognizes Dr. Ezell and